centuries. So this was taken into granted. And it's very interesting to see how the Zionist leadership goes first to the United Nations, suggests the idea of partitioning Palestine into a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, and then prepares its military forces to take over most of Palestine, and also prepares its military forces to uproot the people who lived in Palestine. Now, not all of Palestine was eventually coveted by the Jewish state. And the reason is very simple. A small part of Palestine, which we call today the West Bank, was promised by the Jewish leadership to the Jordanian Hashemite dynasty, still today in power in Jordan. The great-grandfather of present King Abdallah, who was also called King Abdallah, had a secret agreement with the Jewish state, or the future Jewish state, that at least part of Palestine would be annexed to Jordan. This is the West Bank of today. And in return, the Jewish forces would not enter this part, and hence, what is today the West Bank was protected from the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. So one part was saved. Another reason why the ethnic cleansing of Palestine was not complete is the fact that the Arab regimes, although unwillingly and under the pressure of their own public opinion, decided to try and prevent militarily the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Some of the Arab regimes were not even altruistic and sent forces for their own reasons, probably to have a foothold in Palestine. But basically, I think most of the Arab leaders, and that's definitely true about the Egyptian government, it is true about the Syrian government and the Lebanese government, less true about the Jordanian and the Iraqi governments, sent forces in order to try and save the Palestinians from ethnic cleansing. The armies that they have sent failed, basically, but in some cases they succeeded in slowing down the ethnic cleansing. And this is the reason why we have today, not only in the West Bank, a group of Palestinians, but also inside Israel, in the Galilee, a group of Palestinians, which in Israel today are called the Israeli Arabs. A third group of Palestinians was saved because the Israelis had second thoughts about the areas they allowed King Jordan to take, and they wanted to annex part of the West Bank. And they annexed part of the West Bank in 1949. We call it today in Israel Wadi Ara. This is the second concentration of Palestinians inside Israel. But the overall picture was still very tragic, despite those three communities of Palestinians I have described, when I should add the Gaza Strip that was taken by the Egyptian forces. So there are actually 4 communities of Palestinians that were saved from the ethnic cleansing. But 1 million Palestinians were not saved from the ethnic cleansing. And 1 million Palestinians is more or less a 3/4 of the overall Palestinian population. And 1 million Palestinians lived in 531 villages and in 11 towns. So when the ethnic cleansing operation was implemented, the operation decided upon on the 10th of March 1948, after 6 or 7 months, half of Palestine's villages were destroyed. Half of Palestine's towns were destroyed. And more than half of Palestine's population was uprooted and dispossessed. The amazing, or the most bewildering part of this story, apart from understanding historically how a movement that wanted to save the Jews from persecution and extermination ends up uprooting the Palestinians, which is by itself an intriguing, if you want, and a very tragic historical chapter that explains a lot of the problems that we have today not only in the relations between Arabs and Jews, but even between the West and the Arab world and the Islamic world. Apart from that, the most bewildering part of the story is that despite the presence of Western media, United Nations observers on the spot, Red Cross, International Red Cross representatives, in spite a very significant presence, if you want, of outside observers, this uprooting of so many people, this systematic destruction of so many villages and towns was totally ignored by world public opinion. And not because of a very successful Israeli diplomatic manipulation. There are other reasons. I won't go into it. If you want, we can discuss it a bit later. But I'm stating the fact rather than analyzing it. It's quite amazing. When in 1949, Palestinian writers or intellectuals were visiting European capitals, were talking in the United Nations sessions, went to the United States on speaking tours, and they said, do you know that we, a year ago, sometimes, let's say even 7 months ago, half of our country was depopulated. Half of our villages were destroyed. They were immediately branded as liars, as cheaters, as propagandists. I don't know of such a case in modern history, definitely not in the 20th century. I know of cases in the 19th century. But in the 20th century, in the second half of the 20th century, when we have already a technological revolution of media, radio, later on television, a very conscientious international newspapers, can you imagine a group of people that goes around the world, few months, not 50 years later, few months after the disastrous events in Palestine, and they are treated as liars, as people who have invented a catastrophe in order, God knows what, to pursue an unjustified goal. Another amazing fact is that while the Western media reported, by the way, quite systematically, the ethnic cleansing that took place in 1948, the same media, sometimes the same people, already in 1949 adopted the Israeli narrative of what happened in 1948. The Israeli narrative developed by the Israeli Foreign Ministry in 1949 was that no ethnic cleansing took place in Palestine, that all these people who became refugees, the 1 million people, voluntarily left their houses. God knows why people should voluntarily leave their houses. They developed the narrative a bit later and said they voluntarily left because the Arab leaders told them to leave to make way for the invading Arab armies that wanted to destroy the Jewish state that was declared by the United Nations. And that any attempt to adopt a different historical version means that you are an anti-Semite, and it means that you want to harm the Jewish people so early on after the Holocaust. Once the Holocaust was mentioned, nobody dared to question the Israeli narrative of the events of 1948. Now, the importance of the denial of what happened, the importance of the denial of what happens is double-edged. First of all, it disabled anyone who was interested in solving the conflict that would develop later on, not only between Israelis and Palestinians, but between Israel and the Arab world, and if you want, later on between the Western world and the Arab and the Muslim world. Anyone who wanted to solve the problem, for whatever reasons, could not deal with the heart of the problem. If the heart of the problem didn't exist, you had to invent another heart of the problem. And the Americans were very quick to invent another heart of the problem. Why is there a conflict in Palestine that envelops the Arab world, envelops the Muslim world, that really in 1973 almost brought to a third world war? Why did it happen? The narrative was very clear. because of Islamic culture, because of Arab political culture.